Life is not lived, it is endured. From the very moment of our first breath, existence begins not in joy, but in hunger, in need, in a scream torn out of silence. And yet, we have been deceived into believing that life's purpose is comfort, that the highest goal is to weave for ourselves a nest of pleasures soft enough to cushion us from pain. But comfort is not salvation, it is anesthesia. A brief numbness purchased at the expense of truth. Look around you. Every smile hides the tremor of despair. Every family photograph conceals a shadow just outside the frame. Every declaration of happiness is laced with the desperation of someone clinging to a dream before it slips. Yet, we do not dare name it. We prefer distraction, the shallow glow of screens, the endless chase for money, status, warmth, companionship, all the ornaments of life which, when examined closely, are nothing but disguises for a deeper emptiness. Temporary comfort is what most will die for. Not freedom, not clarity, not truth. They die for the fleeting silence of pain. The man who spends his youth grinding away at a career he hates, convinced that retirement will deliver peace, he is trading decades for a fragile illusion. The woman who stays in a relationship out of fear of loneliness, she is bartering her very soul for the dull ache of familiarity. And the countless millions who drown their hours in entertainment, intoxication, or the narcotic of shallow conversation, all of them pay with their life, coin by coin, in exchange for a few crumbs of forgetfulness. But ask yourself, what is the cost of this bargain? Comfort shields us from suffering, yes, but it also shields us from reality. To anesthetize the wound, we must also numb the hand that seeks to heal it. Thus humanity lives half dead, moving through time like shadows in a fog, hoping only that the fog never clears, for to see clearly is to realize the prison walls that surround us. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the revelation. It is the body's whisper that something is wrong. It is the soul's reminder that it has been buried alive. To run from pain is to run from oneself. Yet we have built entire civilizations around this running. The advertisements promise escape. The religions promise paradise. The institutions promise stability. All lies designed to lull you into obedience, so that you remain docile, sedated, and afraid of waking. The truth, if you dare to hear it, is this: mankind's greatest fear is not death, but life without distraction. For in that silence, one discovers that happiness is not a treasure to be found, but a mirage that recedes with every step. And in that silence, comfort reveals its true form, a thin blanket stretched over an abyss. We live as merchants of our own decay, bargaining away the only currency we truly possess: our time, our breath, our pulse. Each hour is a coin, minted in suffering, spent with no possibility of return. Yet, what do most trade this currency for? Not truth, not clarity, not freedom, but for the fragile illusion of safety, for the shallow comfort of temporary anesthesia. Observe the man who devotes 40 years of his life to a career he despises. His mornings begin with an alarm that tears him from sleep like a summons to execution. He rises, not out of desire, but out of necessity. Shackled by obligations he secretly resents. Each day, he exchanges his vitality for wages, telling himself that one day, someday, the burden will lift, that retirement will grant him peace. But peace never comes, for by the time he reaches it, his body is a husk, his spirit withered, and his dreams have long since collapsed into dust. He traded his life for comfort and found only exhaustion. He has sold his hours to a master who never paid him in truth, only in the counterfeit currency of routine. Consider the woman who stays in a loveless relationship, fearing solitude more than falseness. Her evenings are filled with the silence of someone sitting across from her, a presence that has long since become absence. She tells herself she is secure. She tells herself she is loved. But deep within, she feels the hollowness, the cavernous space where intimacy should dwell. Yet she remains, bartering authenticity for familiarity, because the thought of waking to an empty bed is more terrifying than the reality of sleeping beside a stranger. What she calls security is merely stagnation, a grave dug while she still breathes. And then there is the countless multitude, the anonymous millions drowning in the sea of distraction. Screens glow before their eyes like false suns, promising warmth, promising light. They scroll, they click, they consume, as if each fragment of noise could fill the silence gnawing at them. But the silence only grows louder. Every image, every advertisement, every fragment of meaningless entertainment is a plaster over the wound of existence, and beneath the wound festers. They are not living, They are sedating themselves hour by hour, as the real substance of life drains away unnoticed. What unites all these stories is a single truth. In the attempt to flee suffering, they create a greater suffering. The man avoids poverty, but is impoverished of meaning. The woman avoids loneliness, but lives in the loneliness of false intimacy. The distracted masses avoid silence, but live in the agony of never truly hearing themselves. This is the paradox of human existence. The more desperately we run from discomfort, the deeper into its grasp we fall. For comfort is not freedom from suffering, it is merely suffering in disguise, softened, diluted, disguised beneath pleasant forms. The one who numbs himself believes he is escaping, but in truth, he is sinking deeper into chains he cannot see. To seek comfort at all costs is to gamble with one's own existence, and to lose with certainty, for comfort never arrives without a shadow. Every soft pillow hides the coffin it will one day resemble. Every moment of safety is purchased with the surrender of strength. Comfort is not a gift, but a loan taken against the spirit, and its interest is despair. To live only for comfort is to be embalmed while still breathing. Human life is not destroyed in an instant, it is spent, piece by piece, like coins sliding across a counter into invisible hands. Each decision, each compromise, each hour surrendered to the dull safety of routine is another payment to the god of numbness. Few realize the scale of this transaction until their hands are empty, their days exhausted, their vitality drained away in exchange for illusions that dissolve as soon as one tries to hold them. The man chained to his career believes himself practical, responsible, disciplined. Society praises his sacrifice. He is admired for his work ethic, for his ability to endure. Yet beneath the applause lies a quiet tragedy, for what he truly possesses is not discipline but servitude, not strength but resignation. He calls it providing for the future. Yet in truth, he is burning the only future that matters, the living pulse of the present. He is like a man who builds a palace brick by brick, but when it is finally finished, discovers he has died inside it, never once having lived within its walls. The woman in her hollow marriage repeats a similar ritual. Each day, she buries her dissatisfaction under the weight of habit. She rehearses the phrases of devotion, even though they taste like ashes in her mouth. She tells herself she is safe, but her safety is indistinguishable from captivity. Loneliness terrifies her, yet what she refuses to see is that she is lonelier within her walls of comfort than she would ever be in solitude. She fears the empty bed, yet she sleeps every night beside emptiness itself. She has mistaken presence for intimacy, noise for warmth, routine for love. And the great ocean of the distracted here lies the most common form of numbness, the anesthesia of the masses. Screens glow like artificial suns, and each person becomes a moth circling the flame of their own oblivion. They binge and scroll and refresh, mistaking motion for life. They drown themselves in an endless tide of images, headlines, and conversations, yet none of it touches the core of their being. The silence inside them grows louder, like a scream buried beneath laughter. They do not notice that their eyes, once bright, now reflect only the glow of machines. These are not merely stories of individuals. They are the blueprint of civilization itself. Modern life is an elaborate mechanism for the avoidance of pain. Every advertisement promises comfort. Every institution demands obedience in exchange for security. Every cultural norm tells us to hide our despair beneath the mask of success, love, or entertainment. What we call progress is often nothing more than the refining of anesthesia, the engineering of more sophisticated ways to keep mankind asleep. And yet, for all the efforts spent fleeing suffering, suffering remains. It leaks through the cracks of our comforts. The successful businessman wakes at 3 a.m, heart racing, unsure why he feels hollow despite his wealth. The woman with her safe but empty marriage stares at her partner's face and wonders when love slipped silently out the door. The distracted masses, after hours of scrolling, feel an emptiness heavier than before, as if the very act of distraction deepens the wound it sought to cover. This is the cruel paradox. The more desperately we chase comfort, the more unbearable life becomes. Comfort does not solve suffering, it multiplies it. The avoidance of pain ensures that pain seeps into every crevice of our being, disguised, multiplied, unresolved. The prison of comfort has no visible bars, only soft cushions. Comfort is purchased with the soul as collateral. Every illusion of safety is a debt owed to despair. Humanity in its endless bargaining, has become like a gambler who cannot stop placing bets, even as he loses everything. We throw our years into the furnace of habit, hoping the flames will warm us. But fire does not caress, it consumes. By the time we realize the cost of our bargain, the body is old, the will is weary, and the spirit has been traded away in fragments. What remains is only a dim awareness that the comfort we bought has turned into the very suffering we fled. The truth is harsh. Every comfort we cling to carries within it the seed of our undoing. Safety breeds weakness, routine breeds despair, and distraction breeds the very boredom it sought to silence. We bargain with numbness as though it were our salvation, but numbness is not salvation. It is decay masquerading as peace. Comfort shields us from pain, but in doing so, it buries us alive. The grand illusions of comfort are never more visible than in the quiet lives of ordinary men and women who walk among us each day, smiling faintly, speaking lightly, while carrying within them a despair so constant it has become invisible. Their suffering is not the kind that erupts in screams or confessions. It is the kind that persists in silence, unacknowledged, dulled into habit. There is the man who wakes each morning before the sun, not out of desire, but compulsion. His alarm pierces the darkness like a reminder of chains. He dresses in silence, drinks coffee that tastes of ashes, and drives to an office where his spirit withers beneath fluorescent lights. He tells himself he is responsible, that he is working for his children, that someday he will rest. Yet as the years pass, his children grow distant, his health declines, and his so-called someday retreats endlessly into the horizon. He spends his youth dreaming of retirement, only to find his retirement haunted by the ghost of his youth. His bargain is clear. He traded his vitality for security, and in the end discovered he possesses neither. There is the woman whose nights are filled with the steady breathing of a man she no longer loves. Once the sound brought comfort. Now it is a reminder of the silence between them. She stays, not because love endures, but because the thought of leaving terrifies her. She imagines the empty apartment, the lonely dinners, the cold bed. And so she clings to the corpse of a relationship, embalming it with routine. Outwardly, she plays the part smiling at gatherings, posting photographs, performing affection. But inwardly, she lives with a gnawing loneliness deeper than solitude itself, the loneliness of being unseen, even in the presence of another. And there is the teenager, hunched over the glow of his phone long into the night. Each scroll promises connection, each notification a jolt of fleeting importance. Yet, when the screen finally dims, he feels the weight of emptiness heavier than before. His friends are pixels, his conversations echoes, his self-worth tied to numbers that vanish into the ether. He is drowning not in silence, but in noise, and the noise is killing him more thoroughly than silence ever could. He is not escaping loneliness, he is multiplying it. These stories are not rare, they are everywhere. They unfold in quiet kitchens, in office cubicles, in bedrooms, in crowded subway cars. They are the true face of modern existence. Lives exchanged for security, passion suffocated by familiarity, presence obliterated by distraction. Each is a testimony to the same tragic paradox. In trying to avoid discomfort, these individuals have crafted lives of deeper suffering. And yet, they persist. They persist because the will clings to illusion, because the mind fears the collapse of its narcotics. It is easier to continue enduring a half-life than to step into the cold exposure of truth. It is easier to remain anesthetized than to face the raw wound of existence. And so, entire lives pass, not in catastrophe, but in quiet suffocation. Most lives are not ruined by disaster, but by comfort accepted as destiny. The silence of suffering is not peace, it is resignation. Pain is not a guest in life. It is the landlord. It owns the body. It governs the will. It dictates the terms of existence. Every breath we take is signed with its presence, though we try endlessly to deny it. From the first cry of an infant to the last groan of the dying, pain is the thread that binds human life together, unbroken, unrelenting. And yet, we are taught to treat it as a mistake, as an interruption, as if suffering were a rare accident rather than the very substance of being. What is hunger but the body's perpetual reminder of its dependence? What is desire but the gnawing ache of absence? What is longing but the wound of incompleteness? Even in our so-called pleasures, pain whispers. The sweetest taste is haunted by its brevity, the warmest embrace shadowed by the fear of loss. Every joy carries in its seed the inevitability of pain. like a fruit already beginning to rot as it ripens. Look at the body itself, a fragile scaffolding of nerves stretched thin over mortality. Every nerve is a messenger of pain, every heartbeat a reminder of its vulnerability. Health itself is nothing but the silence of pain, and even that silence trembles, knowing that pain waits nearby, patient, ready to re-enter. What we call health is only the brief pause between reminders of our mortality, the eye of the storm, rather than its passing. We build our days around the avoidance of pain, yet pain builds itself into every hour regardless. The worker drags his body through labor, muscles screaming beneath the illusion of necessity. The lover clings to another, terrified of the pain of abandonment. Yet in clinging, he plants the seed of that very abandonment. The scholar buries himself in books, not from joy, but from the pain of restless emptiness. Even the pursuit of knowledge is not freedom, but compulsion, a hunger that grows as it is fed. Pain is not merely physical. It permeates the soul. The anxiety of uncertainty, the fear of death, the bitterness of envy, the gnawing wound of regret, these are not anomalies. They are the very architecture of consciousness. To be conscious is to feel the edge of suffering. To awaken in the morning is already to awaken into lack, into a body and a will that demand, that ache, that gnaw. The dream ends, and with the dream ends, reprieve. Life begins again, and with life begins the repetition of dissatisfaction. Animals suffer as well, but they do not suffer from knowledge. Their pain is immediate, raw, without reflection. The deer runs from the wolf, the bird shivers in the cold. But man suffers twice, once in the flesh and once in the mind. He does not only feel pain, he anticipates it, he remembers it, he multiplies it with imagination. A single loss becomes infinite losses through recollection. A single fear becomes endless through anticipation. The animal flees when the predator appears. Man flees long before and long after, forever hunted by his own mind. And yet, pain is not the enemy. Pain is the truth, speaking through the body, the soul, the world. It is the one phenomenon we cannot falsify, cannot deny. We can argue about God, about meaning, about morality, but let a flame touch the skin, and all argument collapses. Pain speaks a language beyond philosophy, a language all creatures understand. It is pure, absolute, undeniable. It strips away illusion with every strike. Consider grief. What is grief but the proof of attachment, the revelation of how deeply we are entangled in illusion? The pain of loss shows us the fragile fiction we live in, that we can hold on, that we can possess, that permanence exists. Grief shatters that fiction and lays bare the truth. All that we love is borrowed, and the lender always returns. Grief is not a punishment, but a revelation of the nature of things. Or consider physical agony. The body writhes, protests, screams. But within that scream is the stark reminder of mortality. Pain is the herald of death, the messenger that reminds us we are temporary, that this body is not a fortress but a decaying shelter. Pain forces us to remember what we prefer to forget, that all flesh must rot, that all strength must fade, that every heartbeat marches towards silence. In this way, pain is not only the shadow of life, it is its truest light. It illuminates what we are. It unmasks the illusions we wrap ourselves in. Pleasure deceives us into thinking the world is kind. Comfort persuades us that permanence is possible. But pain arrives and tears away the veil, showing us the naked reality of existence. Pain is the philosopher, and we are its unwilling students. To flee pain is to flee truth. To numb pain is to numb reality itself. The one who hides from pain does not escape it. He only ensures it will strike harder, later, when the illusion crumbles. For every sedative wears off. Every distraction ends. Every false comfort collapses. Pain waits at the threshold, patient, inevitable, indifferent. Do not imagine that joy stands opposite to pain. Joy is not the opposite, but the brief interlude pain allows. They are not enemies, but partners, inseparable, bound together. Every joy is framed by its fragility, every delight haunted by its loss. The ecstasy of love is inseparable from the grief it will one day cause. The triumph of success is inseparable from the despair that follows its fading. Pain and joy are not two forces but one, twisted upon itself. Joy is merely pain's disguise, its fleeting mask, before the inevitable revelation. And what of the will, that restless, insatiable force at the core of life? It is pain itself, for the will is nothing but striving, longing, reaching, never satisfied, always hungry. The will is a wound that never closes. To live is to will, and to will is to suffer. Every desire, once fulfilled, gives birth to another, each promise of satisfaction already undermined by its own fleetingness. Happiness is nothing but the brief relief when one desire collapses, before another rises in its place. Life is a pendulum swinging between lack and boredom, between longing and disappointment, and pain is the rhythm of its movement. We attempt to define ourselves by what we pursue: wealth, love, power, art. But beneath each pursuit lies the same thing, an attempt to quiet pain. The artist creates not from pure joy, but from restlessness, from an ache that demands expression. The lover clings not from fulfillment, but from the wound of emptiness. The ambitious chase power not from contentment, but from a hollow that devours them. Strip away the layers, and all you find is pain clothed in different garments. And yet, strangely, pain is the only thing that binds us together. Joy isolates it, makes us forget the world, lose ourselves in our own small ecstasies. But pain reminds us of our shared condition. We recognize it in the eyes of others, even without words. A scream, a sigh, a tremor in the voice, these we understand immediately. Pain is the universal language, the only true communion between beings. In this sense, pain is the essence of life. It is not a flaw in existence, but its foundation. The world is not arranged for our comfort. It is arranged for the will, and the will is suffering incarnate. Existence is not a gift, but a burden, and pain is the measure of that burden. To see this clearly is not to despair, but to awaken. For in recognizing the nature of pain, we cease to be deceived by illusions. We cease to chase the mirage of a painless life. We begin to see comfort for what it is: a brief distraction, a borrowed mask, a narcotic that numbs but does not cure. Pain is the ground beneath all things, and to live without acknowledging it is to float in delusion, endlessly betrayed when reality returns. Pleasure is a pause, pain is the law. To will is to suffer, to live is to bleed. Almo, pain is not the interruption of life, it is life speaking without disguise. Imagine a man seated alone in a dim room. The silence around him grows thick, unbearable. He feels the weight of his own existence pressing down on him like an invisible stone. It is not a particular misfortune tormenting him, not hunger, not loss, not illness. It is the very fact of being itself. This is the purest form of pain, the awareness of existence as burden. Even when nothing is wrong, everything is wrong, because to exist is already to be in deficit, to fall short of what cannot be attained. The absence he feels is not the absence of something, but the absence of satisfaction itself. This man is every man. His pain is not an accident, not a symptom, it is the structure of life itself. Desire gnaws at us, even when we cannot name what we want. The will whispers, even when it has nothing to demand. To exist is to ache. Pleasure, when it comes, does not erase this condition. It merely veils it for a moment. A sweet taste covers the tongue, but only until it fades, leaving a longing for more. A lover's touch soothes, but only until distance or death steals it away. Every joy is bound to time, and time is the executioner of all joy. Thus, what we call happiness is nothing more than the temporary suspension of dissatisfaction, like a prisoner who forgets his chains while dreaming. Consider boredom. What is boredom but pain revealed by the absence of distraction? Strip away labor, entertainment, conversation, and man collapses into the nakedness of his being. In that nakedness, pain is unmasked. Boredom is not nothingness, it is the presence of suffering without disguise, the raw awareness that one's will craves endlessly and finds nothing to consume. It is then that life reveals its truest form, not abundance, but lack. And what of love, that most celebrated of illusions? Love is not the bliss we pretend it to be. It is a hunger, an ache, a wound masquerading as delight. The ecstasy of love is nothing but pain dressed in finery, the pain of longing, of incompleteness, temporarily soothed by union. Yet even in its height, love trembles. It trembles because its object can be lost at any moment, because time corrodes its beauty, because the grave waits with perfect patience. Love is suffering double joy chained to dread, intimacy inseparable from loss. To love is to stand perpetually on the edge of grief. Pain is democratic. It spares no one. The king on his throne suffers no less than the beggar in his rags, though their pains differ in form. Wealth may soften the body's discomforts, but it cannot silence the mind's unrest. Poverty may sharpen hunger, but it is no more a stranger to despair than wealth is. Pain penetrates every class, every culture, every life. It is the one equality in a world built on inequality. Even time itself is an instrument of pain. The past chains us with regret, the future with dread, the present with restlessness. Memory is a knife that reopens wounds thought healed. Anticipation is a storm that never ceases to threaten. The moment itself slips through our fingers the instant we try to hold it, reminding us of our impotence before the flood of becoming. Time is not our ally, but our tormentor, a wheel that crushes all beneath its turning. You may notice how rarely people are truly still. Silence terrifies them. Emptiness frightens them. They fill every gap with noise, with chatter, with occupation. Why? Because stillness exposes pain. It strips away the anesthetics, leaving only the raw wound of existence. We chase after goals, not because we are fulfilled by them, but because, without them, the abyss reveals itself. To be without pursuit is to stand naked before the truth, that life has no inherent satisfaction, no resting point, no final arrival. Pain is thus both the tyrant and the teacher. It tyrannizes us, dictating the rhythms of our days. Yet it teaches us more about reality than any comfort could. Comfort lies, pain does not. Comfort tells us we are safe, fulfilled, complete. Pain tells us we are vulnerable, lacking, incomplete. And which is true? Which reveals the structure of existence? Not the soft lullaby of pleasure, but the cold knife of pain. There are moments when pain strips us so bare that even illusion cannot grow back. The man who loses the one he loves knows this moment. The parent who buries a child knows it. The one who wakes to the diagnosis, to the accident, to the irrevocable collapse, they know it. In such moments, the truth of existence strikes like lightning. It is unbearable, yet it is also undeniable. No philosophy, no religion, no promise can soften it. Pain is reality itself, breaking through the walls of illusion. And yet, there is something almost sacred in these moments. For though pain annihilates, it also clarifies. It reveals what is essential, what cannot be denied, what lies beneath all masks. In pain, we are no longer deceived. We see existence in its nakedness. And while this sight offers no comfort, it offers clarity. There is a kind of dignity in clarity, even if that clarity is terrible. We cannot live without pain, but we can live without illusion. To embrace pain is to embrace truth, and though truth offers no consolation, it frees us from deception. Better the knife that cuts than the opiate that blinds. Better the wound of reality than the dream of paradise. Pain is the pulse of life. To still it is to still existence itself. Pleasure lies, pain reveals. Quote, "Every joy is a mask. Every scream is the truth beneath it." If pain is the law of existence, then illusion is the law of survival. Humanity cannot endure the naked weight of reality, so it constructs shelters not of stone or wood, but of lies, of dreams, of symbols. These shelters are fragile, yet they are worshipped as if eternal. They are illusions woven so tightly into our lives that to question them is treated as heresy. The most ancient of these shelters is religion. From the first flicker of human consciousness, man looked upon the abyss of death and trembled. Unable to face it, he clothed it with stories. He called it afterlife, heaven, rebirth, transcendence. He told himself that death was not an end, but a doorway. He told himself that pain was not senseless, but purposeful, that suffering was punishment, or purification, or preparation for a reward. In truth, death is silence, suffering is blind, and the universe is indifferent. But religion softens these truths with myths, like a mother pressing a child's head to her chest so he cannot see the storm outside. Even today, in an age of science and reason, these myths remain. They have changed their garments, but not their essence. Some speak of energy instead of spirit, of progress instead of paradise, of psychology instead of salvation. Yet the promise remains the same. Your pain has meaning, your suffering is not in vain, your death is not final. These are narcotics sweet, necessary perhaps, but narcotics nonetheless. Next comes society, that vast machinery of roles and rules. Society does not care for truth, it cares for stability. Its task is not to reveal, but to conceal. It tells you who you are, what you should want, how you should live. It prescribes careers, families, entertainments, goals, all of which serve to keep you moving, striving, distracted. For an idle mind might glimpse the abyss, and the abyss is dangerous. Better to drown the individual in endless obligations than to allow him to face his existence in silence. The machinery ensures that you are always too busy to awaken. And within society, there is culture, the bright mask stretched across the machinery's face. Culture gives us art, music, literature, rituals. It appears noble, uplifting. Yet how often is it nothing more than anesthesia refined into beauty? The opera that makes suffering bearable by turning it into song. The novel that disguises despair beneath narrative. The theater that transforms tragedy into entertainment. Even philosophy itself is not innocent. Too often it serves not truth, but consolation, weaving systems to reassure rather than reveal. Then there is the modern machinery of consumerism, perhaps the most honest of all illusions, because it makes no attempt at transcendence. It promises not eternity, not redemption, but distraction. It offers you objects, pleasures, entertainments, each sold as a cure for your emptiness. But the cure expires the moment it is purchased. The new phone dulls boredom for a week. The new car soothes envy for a month. The new lover quiets loneliness for a season. Yet the emptiness returns, more ravenous than before. Consumerism is pure illusion not because it hides pain, but because it multiplies it under the guise of relief. And what of love, friendship, family? These two are woven into the machinery. We are told that companionship redeems existence, that the bonds of affection shield us from despair. But companionship does not abolish pain, it only shares it, sometimes even deepens it. The lover becomes the source of grief, the child the source of fear, the friend the source of disappointment. Love does not solve suffering, it entangles us in it more deeply. It is another illusion, fragile, dangerous, and yet irresistible, the will binding us with its sweetest chain. What unites all these illusions is their function. They do not change reality, they conceal it. Religion conceals death. Society conceals meaninglessness. Culture conceals despair. Consumerism conceals emptiness. Love conceals solitude. Each is a mask pressed against the same face, the face of suffering. And humanity clings to these masks, not because they are true, but because they are bearable. Yet every mask eventually slips. Religion falters when prayers go unanswered. Society collapses in war or revolution. Culture decays into noise. Consumer goods rot and bore. Love withers into estrangement or death. And when the mask slips, reality is seen once again, raw and unbearable. The machinery fails, and pain reasserts itself with merciless clarity. But perhaps the cruelest illusion of all is hope. Hope whispers that tomorrow will be different, that the next achievement, the next possession, the next lover will finally bring satisfaction. Hope keeps us moving, striving, enduring. Without it, most would collapse. Yet hope is the most deceptive narcotic, for it ensures that we remain enslaved to the will. It persuades us to keep bargaining with existence, even though the bargain is rigged from the start. Hope is the chain that feels like wings. Illusion is not the veil of life, it is its architecture. Hope is the cruelest lie, for it binds us most tightly to the will. What we call culture is often only despair rehearsed in beautiful form. The machinery of illusion is vast, intricate, relentless. It surrounds us from birth to death. It tells us who we are, what to believe, what to desire. It leaves us little room to breathe outside its walls. And yet, if we dare to glimpse beyond it, even for a moment, we find not comfort, but a strange kind of liberation. For in seeing the machinery, we are no longer deceived by it. We may still play its game, but we do not mistake it for truth. Up to now, it has been possible to hide behind distance, to hear of pain, as though it belonged to others, to examine illusions as though one could remain outside their grasp. But the moment comes when the mirror turns, and what you see is not a story, not a theory, but your own face. It begins in silence. The voice within grows louder, whispering that all the examples you have heard are not strangers but yourself. The man in the office, the woman in her hollow marriage, the youth addicted to screens, these are not figures in a tale. They are reflections. You recognize in them the architecture of your own days. You see how many of your choices are not choices at all, but bargains made with numbness. You feel how many of your comforts are not triumphs, but shackles. Recognition is not gentle, it is violent, like the ripping away of skin, for it reveals that the life you thought was yours is largely a performance scripted by fear. Your career, your relationships, your entertainments, how many were chosen freely, and how many were chosen to avoid the discomfort of emptiness? How much of your identity is not you at all, but the machinery of illusion speaking through you? Perhaps you believed yourself free, but freedom is a word whispered to prisoners to make their chains bearable. What you call freedom is often nothing more than obedience to unseen masters. The will, the fear of pain, the demand for comfort. You move as they dictate, and you call it choice. You strive as they compel, and you call it meaning. But look closely. Is it freedom to be driven by cravings you did not choose? Is it freedom to spend your life fleeing suffering, when the very act of fleeing multiplies it? This is the abyss of recognition. To see that the prison you inhabit is not external but internal, built not of walls but of habits, desires, illusions. It is to understand that your comforts have cost you more than your pains ever did. Pain at least speaks the truth, but comfort has stolen your life under the guise of safety. Stand in this recognition long enough, and the defenses collapse. You realize you are not the exception, but the rule. You are not outside the machinery, you are its product. You are not the master of the will, you are its instrument. The abyss stares back, not from the world, but from within. This is why recognition terrifies. It is easier to remain in half-consciousness, to let distractions cover the silence, to keep running in circles. Recognition ends that possibility. It drags you to the edge of the abyss and forces you to look. And what do you see? Not meaning, not redemption, not salvation. You see the truth that life is suffering, that the will cannot be satisfied, that every path circles back to pain. But within this unbearable vision lies clarity. For once you have seen the abyss, you are no longer deceived. You cannot pretend the machinery will save you, that comfort will fulfill you, that hope will deliver you. You see illusions for what they are, temporary veils over permanent wounds. You recognize that your life, like every life, is not a triumphant journey toward happiness, but a slow negotiation with suffering. Recognition is the death of innocence, but it is also the birth of lucidity. It strips away the false promises, leaving only the raw contours of existence. And though those contours are cruel, they are real. To live without illusion is to live without anesthesia. It is to feel the full weight of being, without distraction, without narcotics, without lies. Do not mistake this lucidity for despair. Despair belongs to those who still cling to illusion, who suffer when it breaks. But once illusion has dissolved completely, there is no despair, only a grim serenity, a knowledge that life is suffering and nothing more, and that in knowing this, you cannot be deceived again. Recognition is the wound through which truth enters. The abyss is not outside you, it is you. Despair is the price of clinging to hope. Clarity is the freedom of abandoning it. The abyss has opened, and the illusions have fallen away. You stand before existence without its masks, without its consolations, without its narcotics. At first, the sight is intolerable, like eyes forced to stare into the sun until they burn. But remain there long enough, and something shifts. The blinding becomes vision. The chaos becomes pattern. The very pain that once felt like destruction reveals itself as revelation. Breakthrough clarity is not joy. It is not peace. It is not triumph. It is the recognition that suffering is the fabric of existence, and that by ceasing to flee it, one ceases to be enslaved by it. Pain does not vanish, but it no longer deceives. It strikes, and you no longer mistake it for injustice. It persists, and you no longer imagine it avoidable. You see it as it is, the very condition of being, the very breath of life. When this clarity takes root, a strange reversal occurs. The suffering that once made you frantic, that once drove you into distractions, loses its sting, for it is no longer an enemy. You no longer demand that life be otherwise. You no longer ask the impossible that existence provides satisfaction, permanence, redemption. You accept its cruelty, and in acceptance, the cruelty loses its teeth. Imagine a man walking in a storm. If he believes the storm should not be, every drop of rain feels like an insult, every gust of wind an injustice. He curses the sky, resents the clouds, trembles in anger. But if he accepts the storm as storm, he is still drenched, still cold, still buffeted by winds, yet he is no longer wounded by them. The storm has not changed, but his relation to it has. So too with existence. Once accepted as suffering, it ceases to mock us, even as it continues to wound. This clarity brings with it a terrible freedom. Terrible, because it strips away all consolations. There is no redemption, no paradise, no escape. But freedom, because it leaves nothing to lose. If life is suffering, then there is nothing further to fear. Every pain becomes confirmation, not betrayal. Every loss becomes recognition, not surprise. The worst has already been admitted, and in admitting it, you are no longer its victim. In this way, clarity transforms suffering into strength. Not strength in the sense of triumph, but in the sense of endurance. You endure not because you hope, not because you deceive yourself, but because endurance itself is all that remains. You stand firm, not expecting relief, not waiting for reward. You stand because standing is all that existence allows. And within this endurance, there is a grim serenity, no longer tossed about by the promises of illusion, no longer wounded by hope's betrayals. You move through the world with cold eyes and steady breath. You see others still trapped in the machinery, still chasing comforts, still bargaining with numbness, still clinging to hopes. You pity them, but you do not envy them, for their joy is only anesthesia, and their despair is the price of its collapse. You, at least, are free of the cycle. Clarity is a kind of solitude. Few will understand it, fewer will welcome it. Most will call it bleak, nihilistic, inhuman, but their condemnation is proof of their bondage. They cling to illusions because they cannot bear the nakedness of truth. They mistake anesthesia for life, and so they will call sobriety death. But sobriety is the only true life, life stripped of lies, endured without disguise. And there is power in this sobriety. Not the power to change existence, but the power to see it clearly. Not the power to conquer suffering, but the power to suffer without deception. To walk through the storm without imagining a sunlit paradise beyond it. To endure pain without weaving meaning around it. To accept death as silence without dressing it in myths. This is not the power to be free from suffering, but the power to exist within it without collapse. Freedom is not the absence of suffering, but the absence of illusion. Clarity is not the end of pain, it is the end of deception. Quote, "To endure without hope is to endure without chains." Breakthrough clarity is not a gift bestowed by the world. It is stolen from the world, torn from the wreckage of illusions. It is not handed to you. It is forced upon you when you dare to stop fleeing. It is what remains when every comfort has been stripped away, when every hope has rotted, when every illusion has burned. What remains is truth, brutal, indifferent, inescapable, and the strength that comes from no longer needing anything else. You have heard of suffering. You have seen its machinery. You have peered into the abyss and felt its breath upon your skin. But now the mirror turns entirely toward you. Not the anonymous man in the office, not the woman in her hollow marriage, not the distracted crowd you. What bargains have you made? What comforts have you traded your hours for? What illusions have you clung to, whispering to yourself that they were truths? You know the answer, even if you try to deny it. Your life, like all lives, has been a series of negotiations with numbness. You have chosen the familiar over the real, the anesthetic over the wound, the mask over the face. You have fled from discomfort, and in fleeing, you have built your prison with your own hands. Do not deceive yourself further. Every comfort you clutch is temporary. Every illusion you cherish is fragile. Every hope you nurture will betray you. The machinery does not care whether you recognize it or not. It will grind you down regardless. But you have a choice, to be crushed while dreaming, or to stand awake within the crushing. The call is not to escape pain. That is impossible. The call is to face it without disguise, to endure it without illusion, to strip away every false promise, every narcotic story, every mask of culture and comfort, until nothing remains but existence itself, raw, unadorned, unbearable, and yet endured. Most will turn away. They will retreat into the warmth of their distractions, clutch their hopes tighter, drown themselves in the narcotics of comfort. They will call this courage, when it is only fear. But you, if you have listened this far, if you have felt the knife of recognition cut into your flesh, you cannot return to sleep. The machinery will never deceive you again. So do not flee. Stand where you are. Let the storm strike. Let the abyss stare into you. Let suffering speak its language, and do not silence it with lies. You will still suffer, but you will suffer truthfully. You will still endure, but you will endure awake. And that, in this world of sleepwalkers, is the only strength that matters. To live without illusion is to stand naked before existence and still refuse to kneel. The only dignity life allows is the clarity to endure it. Freedom is not escape, but recognition and the refusal to look away. Now, the words fall silent. The illusions tremble. The abyss remains. The choice is yours. Return to the narcotics of comfort, or walk forward, stripped, sober, alone, and awake.